Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys are liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We are about to get into it. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great Friday. I just woke up, so I don't know how my Friday is going just yet, but we're going to find out, okay? On today's show, we're going to be talking about whether or not Arsenal's success, if that's what you want to call it, has impacted the academy. And maybe that's a reason why Mikel Arteta is not using the academy players, this and that. We've had these conversations, but I read Art DeRoche's article in The Athletic, and I think he made some decent points. I think he got a good lay of the land in terms of how many minutes these players are getting, what the impact could be, and all those types of things. So I do want to chit chat with you guys about that, as we've been having loads of conversations about why the youth is not playing, why they can't even get a minute, things like that. And then I also wanted to talk to you guys about whether or not you care about the FA Cup, because I woke up this morning and I took a little look at Twitter and I started seeing the little tweets here and there about whether or not the FA Cup is important. It doesn't really show anything if we win it. I want to win it, but it's not as important. It's not this and it's not that. And I'll be honest with you guys, almost every single time that we start playing in domestic cups, whether it's right before we play the game or right after we go out, there's always this kind of like feeling in the fan base where we try to minimize the importance of domestic cups. And I just want to kind of talk about the mentality and the mindset around that, because whether you have deep rooted, like core memories of Arsenal winning domestic cups, like I do think you have to think about things in a practical sense and not always in an analytical sense. Yeah, the FA Cup is not the biggest cup, and it's a bigger cup is the Premier League. So you need to focus on that. But this team has never won anything. This particular iteration of Arteta's Arsenal has not won anything. And I think if you think of things from a practical sense instead of an analytical sense, you would probably start to make the assertion that if these players could win a smaller trophy, it would give them the confidence to win a bigger one, right? Because we're basically asking a team who has barely any players in it that have won major trophies, right, to go out there and win the Champions League and the Premier League. Why not start with an FA Cup? So we're going to talk about all those types of things. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, but listen, get into the chat and let me know what you guys are thinking. Also, it was funny because yesterday, when the Onana news started coming out, if you want to know a little bit about my opinion on the Onana news, Amadou Onana to Everton, or to Arsenal from Everton. I did a show, the 9 p.m. show yesterday was about that. If you want to go back and watch that, but um, I I was like, sometimes I forget that like everything like sets fire on Twitter, especially if you say something that's like unpopular or something like that. And when I saw the Onana links, I was like, the realization that Arteta is less like Pep and more like Sean Dyche is a harsh one. And I'm getting absolutely annihilated on Twitter about it. And it's fine because like literally, who cares? Like it's just a bunch of people on their freaking phone. But it's just funny because like even though I was mostly joking about it, I'm like the way people are like defending Mikel Arteta's like honor in my comment section, I'm like, do you guys actually think he's like Pep? Do you? Like, I actually think people believe he's like Pep. I'm like, I actually don't think he's like Pep. I think his style is more like Moyes and more about keeping teams out and being in the duels and things like that. If you buy Kai Havertz and Declan Rice and Amadou Onana, you fucking like duels, you know? Like if Tony is your favorite striker, you want to do duels. You want to be more compact and then, you know, hit, do set pieces and be big and strong and it's stuff like that. Like I just feel like sometimes when you look at the types of players that Arteta brings in and the type of like philosophy behind like what Mikel Arteta does, I don't see Pep. So even if you don't like the way that I put it, he's not like Pep. He's not. Like he's not like Pep. So I don't know why you guys are defending his honor this way. He doesn't we try to play like a little bit like Pep style with the inverted and all that kind of stuff, but in reality, the more that we go into the Mikel Arteta project, the more I'm thinking that he's more like Moyes than anybody else. And I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing, but all I'm saying is that like Why are we pretending like Mikel Arteta is like Pep? We've been with him for 4 years. He ain't. He's not. His best periods for Arsenal are when we're more defensively sound and we're more direct. I would actually prefer us to do more of that because I think this faux tiki-taka style that we're trying to do, million passes, pass you to death, actually doesn't suit our players. So yeah, I don't know why everybody is like, even if you don't like the way I put it, have a seat. Like, you don't need to defend his honor. I'm not saying Mikel Arteta is the worst manager in the world. I actually rate Dyche and what he does, right? I think he is actually a good coach. But let's be freaking for real. Like, Arteta is not like Pep, and I think we've learned this by now, right? I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Matt G says, "Hey Jess, hi, and chat. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you as well." Lucas says the whole fan base before the season was saying we want to compete in all cups. Now I see debate if the FA Cup is needed. Bad mentality. And the thing is anytime that you put any sort of pressure or act like you require the club to be successful in a real sense, not finish second and almost do something, but actually win the silverware, you were like the devil in the fan base, like trust and believe. But what I want to talk about first before we get into the FA Cup stuff, because obviously, like, that's a longer conversation about, like, how we're going to set up and things like that and the importance of the FA Cup. So stick with me. I do want to talk about this article that came out from Art DeRoche. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I think it was very timely and because we've been speaking about the academy and why these players are not being integrated and things like that, or even like they're not even getting a sniff. And that's also not just Miles Lewis Skelly and Ethan Aweri and Rule Walters. I'm also looking at players like Emil Smith Rowe and Reese Nelson, and I'm like, what is the plan? And so just to give you guys like a little like idea of what he kind of was talking about, he was saying like, opportunities are very vital in football, and they come few and far between. We know that. And the better the club, the more few and far between they become. Most people want to see the young talent flourish. That is why one of the undercurrents of Arsenal's season this season is the lack of meaningful chances for the peripheral academy graduates has become a problem. And so he's talking about Emil Smith Rowe, who's 23, and Reese Nelson, who is 24. So these are not young players anymore, in my opinion. I think they're obviously pre-prime, but they're definitely not in their infancy, right? These players they're there. They exist. They're not that young. And so he kind of talked about like the injuries that both Reese Nelson and Emil Smith Rowe have been plagued with over the years, but they have been fit. And across the 9 occasions, uh, let's see, he was like, Nelson has started 3 games all season, 2 in the Carabao Cup and a dead rubber final Champions League group game away to Eindhoven. Across the 9 occasions, he has been brought off the bench in the league, and the longest time he spent on the pitch is 26 minutes. For Smith Rowe, 5 sub appearances in the top flight, it's 22 minutes. So they're not getting a lot of playing time. They're used very sparingly, right? And there's also been confusion around the lack of exposure for the club's young academy graduates. So this is your Rule Walters, your Mario Cozier-Dewberry, your Lino Sousa, your Miles Lewis Skelly, Ethan Aweri, these guys. With Champions League debuts when winning comfortably in the group matches against Sevilla or Lens, or in a meaningful final like PSV when where first place is already secure, it's strange. Like, these are not isolated choices. And Arteta said in his press conference that it wasn't the right time. Like, you don't just throw them in there against a team that hasn't lost at home in nearly 2 years. I didn't think it was the right moment. I wanted to see how the game developed, but it was too much, I think, for them. Right. And that sentence alone just, I think a lot of people just took that and was like, yeah, Mikel Arteta, that makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, they haven't lost in 2 years and this and that. But I think if you think about this critically and with your own mind without wanting to always see Mikel Arteta as the right, doing the right thing, you have to really call a question of like, does it really matter that it's inconsequential? We've won the group. Who cares? Like, it's not going to demoralize. It's not going to fully demoralize them to put them out there. Like, it's just not. It's like even PSV didn't play to the best of their ability. Like, everybody was pretty much like, this is a fucking scrimmage, you know? And so this idea that if you throw them in there, they haven't lost a home game and blah, blah, blah. I didn't think it was the right moment. When is the right moment? Because if that's not the right moment, I don't know if it's coming. I don't know if it's coming. And so the track record of Arteta's word choice of the right context make more sense when recognizing most of his focus in these 4 years has been about stabilizing the team. So yeah, in years gone past, like when Arsenal were trying to stabilize things and we were under like, we were a mess. I can understand more why you wouldn't want to integrate academy players in. But this is a new Arsenal that is fighting for Champions League, should be fighting for domestic cups, and also should be fighting for the title. And so this Arsenal team was good enough to go through their group stage pretty easily, and so easily so that the last game became inconsequential. So we're no longer in the same context of fighting for our lives. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's new, you know? And so that's why it feels very like strange. And he did mention that he had the opportunity to maybe use Emil Smith Rowe against West Ham, and he chose Leandro Trossard. And even though Trossard wasn't playing well, Emil Smith Rowe didn't come on until like the 80th minute, right? And so it does call into question whether or not, like, are we so successful and like Arsenal are so good and all this kind of stuff. And like, there's just no right time where we could not spare any of these players any sort of time. And for me, the ripple effect on this is not necessarily about, oh my gosh, we're not going to see Ethan Nwaneri play for Arsenal this season. Well, I'm going to cry. It's these players are not going to want to stay at Arsenal. They're not going to want to sign new deals. Like, we've been able to convince them to sign new deals, but as more academy players see how they're being treated, they're just going to do what Balogun did. Balogun saw what happened with Nketiah. He has the same agent and was like, actually, I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to sign a new deal and then not play for 6 months after the manager talked up how important I am to the team. And maybe Arteta's still feeling guilty about that. I don't know. Maybe that's why he's playing Nketiah, but listen, we're not going to be able to keep these academy graduates very long if they don't feel like they can get meaningful opportunities in the first team. And that doesn't mean that I expect them to play in the Premier League and start in the Premier League. I don't expect that. But when Arteta is basically in the press conference talking nonsense about how it wasn't the right context in a dead rubber, you have to start thinking maybe he just doesn't give a shit about Hale End, right? So I think it is something that a lot of Arsenal fans are thinking about. And I'm definitely thinking about it because, again, like, you can solve some of your problems, at least in the short term, around, squad issues, injury crises with a decent academy. And I don't think Arsenal's academy is the best. Like, I'm not sitting here thinking that we have fucking La Masia. Like, I'm not dumb. But do I think our players are so like, oh my gosh, they're so bad that they couldn't just like do a little job? I was speaking to Deluded Gunner yesterday, and he had actually mentioned Roel Walters as being probably the closest to being playing games for Arsenal. And he would struggle like any academy player would coming from the academy into the first team, but he could do a job. And it's strange that Arteta hasn't tried to use that as something, because instead of using Cedric and Ben White, who's injured in a dead rubber, he could have used Roel Walters, and again, it would have been inconsequential. He was playing next to Saliba. He wouldn't have died. Like, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. And so it's one of those things where it's not that deep in terms of like, I expect our entire first team to be full of academy graduates, but I think the fact that there are none that have been brought through by Mikel Arteta is definitely something that is there. And it's like, how hard do they need to work to get into it? Is it like this weird thing with you where you feel like, they need to work really hard to get in, like, what, like, just give them fucking 5 minutes. So it's one of those things. I don't think it's that deep, you know. I don't think it's that deep at all. The Arsenal Perspective says, good morning and afternoon, people. Good morning to everybody who's joining. There's 130 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. Again, if you're like, what is she talking about? We're talking about the academy. Is it that important? Are we just overthinking it? Is it an overreaction, or is there something actually there? Because Art DeRoche is writing about it, and I think sometimes it's about who says it, who's saying it, who's the messenger, like right message, wrong messenger. And I've seen some people say the same things that I've said about the lack of utilization of the academy, or playing players out of position and people like, oh, yeah, that sounds really good. But when I say it, it just sounds like complaining. So I get sometimes the messenger is more important than the message, But Art DeRoche is somebody that is highly regarded in the Arsenal fan base as, a good mouthpiece, especially for the academy and Hale End and all that kind of shit. And he's talking about it. So maybe people will listen a little bit because I don't think people are saying that we have to play these players in the Premier League. But I think what we are saying is that like the idea that they cannot step onto the pitch is very strange. Very strange. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's weird. Aris says, you handle yourself well against Northside on that stream. I had so much fun on that stream, you guys. I don't think you guys understand. Like, I love a debate. And I love, I don't know, like, I don't know what it is about me, but like, I like being in situations where people have like opposite views. And like, I don't know, maybe I like arguing. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. you know? Um, Liverpool plays 6 young players in the last Europa League group final game. Liverpool had clinched the top spot. They threw all their youngsters onto the pitch. And also, it's not just Liverpool. Man City also did it as well. Like, I remember people were like, "Oh my God, look at Bayern and Real Madrid. They're not rotating, but Manchester City did." That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying is that it's sometimes it's okay to question what's going on. It doesn't mean you're Arteta out and you're toxic. It doesn't. I'm just questioning whether or not he can use all of his resources to the best of his ability. Because right now, I think he's wasting quite a bit. And that doesn't mean that Roel Walters needs to start every single game. But seeing Cedric play that game, who should be gone in this window, if Cedric is gone in this window, then you wasted 60 minutes of potentially seeing if Roel Walters could do a job in a position where you have a half a fit right back. You see what I'm saying? It made no sense to play Cedric if you're going to get rid of him in this window. It just didn't. And no, them seeing him play for 60 minutes wasn't going to change whether or not they thought he was shit or shittier. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't going to change anything. So yeah, the McChronicle says Arsenal is bringing in a new team doctor next season. Yeah, I think we do need one. We still haven't replaced O'Driscoll, right? Michael says the Arsenal medics should be looked into. Remember Carzola, Chamberlain, Wilshere injury issues. I think that's all O'Driscoll. He was there for many, many years. And we got rid. So yeah. The McChronicle says, I'll say this about Jess. We may not agree all the way on Arteta, but at least she's keeping an open mind and an objective. I'm always open to trying to I don't care about Arteta more than I care about Arsenal. So my feelings on him are very like objective. Like, they're very much like, okay, I can see it for what it is. Right. But I think some people are very so wedded to the project in Arteta that sometimes they can't see things that are right in front of their face. And because I do talk to rivals probably a little bit more than other people, sometimes, like, some people only talk to really Arsenal fans, or they don't talk to anybody at all. But if you have rival fans in your lives, or you speak to rivals on a regular basis, if they're not, just haters all the time, sometimes they bring up stuff that I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense, because they can see it objectively, right? They can see it from the outside looking in. And so because of that, I'm like, oh, yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it? And that doesn't mean that I think Arteta is a fucking bum. Like, that's not what I think. I don't think he's a bum. But do I think he's doing everything right? No, no. And when I'm new in my job, I know I'm making mistakes, right? So what's the likelihood of him not making mistakes on his first job? Lucas says we are bringing in the Crystal Palace doctor. We are bringing the Crystal Palace doctor in. I remember that. Aha says, hi, Jess, random question. Who do you think was Arsenal's best player of 2023 calendar year? I think it's Gabriel, and it's not particularly close either, in my opinion. I guess it would have to go to the most consistent player. Doesn't it have to be Saliba? I don't know. Saliba has some dodgy moments there too. And Gabriel did at the beginning. No, in 2023, it might have to be Gabriel, because he straightened up a lot after he signed that new deal in October. It might be, you might be right. It might be Gabriel. He's been the most consistent in the year of 2023. In 2022, he still had some nonsense going on, but after he signed his new deal, he definitely went up a level, and he's been pretty much that player since then. So it probably has been Gabriel. He's been our most consistent player, despite being super, super, underrated, if that makes sense, Um, just Jashal says he is still learning, but we ain't got time for that. And that's a conversation that I feel like never really comes to the forefront as a genuine conversation. Is as much as you might like Arteta and the idea of the project and where it's going, and you could also feel like, because I feel like he's done a good job at turning over the team and getting the culture right and all those types of things. So I don't ever want to discount those things because I think that they're great, and I think Arteta is a good coach, but he is actively learning on the job, and Arsenal maybe don't have time to wait for him to potentially become a generational manager, because that's what it requires. Arsenal are never going to be able to compete with Pep and Klopp on a consistent basis without a generational world-class manager. Nobody has beaten Pep to the league title that was not a world-class manager. So if Arteta's not that, he's not going to beat them. And he had a really good opportunity to do it last year and couldn't do it, right? And so I just think that, like, it's just a normal ass conversation that I feel like sometimes feels so taboo, because everybody feels like anything that's not like all the way like, or like so positive, like it's all positive, they feel like it's Arteta out, and it's not, you know? I don't know how to you know what I mean? Like, if you say, Arteta probably got those tactics wrong, people are screaming at you. I'm like, I mean, Klopp gets tactics wrong, so why wouldn't Arteta get tactics wrong? That doesn't make sense, you know? I'm just saying, sometimes we need to be a little bit more open-minded. Kenneth says, if he is not good enough, then who is good enough for the job? That's not my job. It's Edu's job to figure that out. It's not my job. It's not my job to figure that out. I can think of some managers that could probably do a good job at Arsenal, but once they get rid of Mikel Arteta, or if and when they get rid of Mikel Arteta, the next person that comes in, I feel like, needs to be experienced and has won things before. I know that that's like, oh, I don't want a Mourinho or a Conte, and I don't necessarily want those either, but I definitely don't want another novice or somebody that's never won anything before. I know that for sure, you know? But until they can figure out somebody that really could take us to the next level, I don't feel like you should just sack Mikel Arteta. Like, you know what I mean? But yeah, I definitely feel as though, like, the academy can be used a little bit better. And, you've convinced the likes of Ethan Nwaneri to sign a new deal. And I think they're in talks to get Will Walters and Cozier Dewberry on new deals. And if I was them, I'd be looking at it a little bit sideways, not because I don't love Arsenal or anything like that, but more on the fact that, like, am I actually going to get a chance here? If I go out on loan, am I coming back? Who's gone out on loan and came back? I have very little hope that Patino is going to be integrated in. The way Arteta speaks about Patino is like he's there, but he ain't. It's like it's very far away. It's like you're there, and that's just what it is. There's no warmness to it. There's no he's doing his, whatever, he's learning first team experience, but we look forward to having him back. It's nothing. It's very cold and distant, and we'll just see what happens. I don't think even if you go on loan, you're gonna come back. Who's gone on loan and come back except for fucking Eddie? Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Um, but yeah, I wish that Arteta would be a little bit more relaxed on some of these things and allow some of these players to get like a minute or two here and there. It doesn't have to be that deep, you know. I'm not saying it has to be like freaking starting all the time, um, but I do think we could do a little bit more, if that makes sense. I'm just checking Twitter to make sure nothing is going on. This coffee is so good. I need it. Arteta on if AFC will do any business in Jan. That's a possibility. Oh yeah, so he's doing his press conference. Arteta on the team news. Zinchenko is progressing well. We have another training session tomorrow, and we'll evaluate if he's ready to play the game. Listen, some people are going to be upset, but the way that we're hanging by a thread at left back, I'll take my progressive passer Zinchenko. I will take it, because right now the only option that we have at left back is Kivior. And watching Kivior against Fulham, he's done. Confidence on the floor, the way that Arteta wants him to play doesn't suit him. He's done. The next step for Kivior will be after we don't see him for a couple more months is in the summer they'll be talking about loaning his ass out. Like, he's not gonna make it. He's not gonna make it. Not because he's not a good player, but because like just the way that the car crash that is the way that Arteta integrates some of these players in. We need Zinchenko to come back in, even if you don't love him. But yeah, he says basically on doing business in January, we are open for the market, but the emphasis is on making the most out of the players that we have. We'll work together with the club. Well, how about you do it? How about you get the most out of the players that you got? It's like you're talking, but I don't see you walking. Like, I need you to do these things, Mikel, because you're not doing it. You're not doing it. And we need a response for the FA Cup. We do need a response. When I was talking to Diluted, and he was basically saying, we were basically talking about the FA Cup, and both of us were nervous. Obviously, when you're playing Liverpool, you become nervous, because they're in a good run of form. Like they look like they're going this way, and we look like we're going that way. So it's a tough one, but you got to go as strong as possible, and you have to change the narrative, I think, because I think we're definitely in that kind of like, either you go this way and you beat them and we start talking about going, upwards and wiping the slate clean over the last couple of weeks or whatever, or you lose and you go out and we start talking about, if Arteta doesn't win the Premier League and doesn't win the Champions League, what are we going to do? Do you see what I'm saying? And so they have to win this game. Like, I think it's important. I think you need to start building some level of like start over, flip the page, and do something new. Give the players new problems to solve. Tweak your tactics a little bit. Maybe get some fresh blood out there. I don't know what Arteta needs to do, but he has to do something, because I just feel like if you lose this game and you go out of the FA Cup, we're having some really tough conversations during that January break. And I'm not looking forward to that. And we'll also kind of want to chit chat about the FA Cup, because I'm already seeing people like say that it's not important, or, I love Alex, and he did tweet this, but he was saying that like the prize money isn't that big. So if the prize money's not that big, then it's not really, I'm not that fussed if we don't win it. I want us to win it, but I'm not fussed if we don't win it. And I just feel like that's a very cold and analytical way of thinking about a competition that has been so near and dear to so many Arsenal fans, you know? And we don't get into this part of anything anymore. We're very like, everything is very driven by the analytics and the plan. And it's nothing about what sport is actually about, which is winning, getting to finals, getting to Wembley, winning, no matter what the trophy is. It's all about this plan, and eventually we'll get there, and blah blah blah, the money. And I don't really care about that, because as a sports fan, all I care about is getting to that final and feeling what it feels like to be in the final. Not But we got closer than we did last season, and look at our points per game tally. And Man City are great, but look how close we are with them with XG and XG against and XG. I get those things, but at the end of the day, like, sport is about getting this going, and this doesn't get going if you're not in high leverage games. You're not beating big teams, and you're not taking down Goliath and things like that. And so I just feel like Arsenal fans remove a lot of the emotional side of the game and talk about things in a way that sport is never spoken about. You never speak about the prize money being the reason why you care about a competition more than another. It's not a thing. I don't care about the prize money. I want us to win the FA Cup because it's our cup, and because in domestic cups under Mikel Arteta, beyond the one time that he won one in 2019, we've been absolutely diabolical. And there's no reason why this team cannot get a little bit further. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a trade off, go far in the FA Cup or slide down in the Premier League. It should not be that. And if it is that at this stage, we don't have the right manager. We don't have the right team, period. Because it should not be, oh, either you go far in the FA Cup or you go far in the Premier League. you can't have both. Why can't we have both? After 4 years, we can't compete in multiple competitions at a high level. We can't? What are we spending the money for? You know, this is Arsenal. In the past, when we were good, not when we were good in the 2010s, because we weren't good in the 2010s, when we were actually good, we used to fight on all fronts, and it wasn't this conversation about prize money and, but the squad and all this kind of stuff. The squad was smaller back then. Squad was smaller back then. Players just got on with it, and I think we're making things way too data and analytical. And I get that players are playing a lot of minutes and all this kind of stuff, but squads are bigger. We're spending more money on squad players now. People got 50 million pound squad players in their team now. Arsenal need to get real, and Arsenal fans need to put more pressure on the team to win something, because really, I think that if this particular team wins a smaller cup first, they will feel like they can win something bigger. But pretending as though like they're just going to win the Champions League is kind of like, really, you know? Vegas Gunner, thank you so much for your super chat. Says big up DST. Arteta doesn't rotate. That's the major problem. The starters look spent already. You got to rotate the squad. You have to use your squad better. The way that Reece Nelson and Emil Smith Rowe are actively shackled to this team and this club, but we don't give them any playing time. They get 20 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there. Makes no sense to me. And I think the two of them, despite not maybe being the best players that we could ever have, we definitely can get a lot more out of them than I'd prefer either sell them or try to utilize them a lot more, not keep them and get no money for them and just leave them on the bench, right? Because you're playing Saka's legs off and Reece Nelson could do a job. Sometimes you got to use your squad, and we just don't do it. Samuel, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, I'm sure we have some academy players that will save us some money for some future positions. You'll never know if you have another Saka if you never use them. Saka didn't look like Saka before he came out of the academy, by the way. They thought he was talented, but nobody was talking about Saka. He came through as he was, he played forward in midfield and like academy career, but came in as a left back. Nobody really thought much of it, but he took his one opportunity in the Europa League, and the rest is history. We'll never have another moment like that under Mikel Arteta. It's never the right moment, if it's never the right moment, we'll never know, So there you go. World Boss says, good morning, Jess. Look forward to Sunday to see how the players respond. We didn't get a response against Fulham. We need a response now. Would have been nice to bounce back against lesser opposition, wouldn't have? Because now you need to bounce back against probably the best team in the league at this moment. So good job. Way to go, guys. JC says, regarding contract and extensions, that falls more on Edu, more so than on Arteta, in my opinion. This is true, but if the manager makes the decisions on whether or not they want to play somebody, like Arteta played Ethan Nwaneri in that game against Brentford because he knew that the contract extension was coming. And so he does make decisions on who he's going to play. So if these players see that this manager doesn't play academy players or doesn't rate the academy or whatever, they will make decisions whether or not they'll sign contracts or not. Like Edu can't force them into it. So yeah, Edu's responsible for getting them into the room and doing the negotiations and stuff like that. But Arteta is like his own man out there. I think, I know that they have things in their contracts as well. Like some players, you can't play them, if you play them such amount of minutes, then you have to pay more and all this kind of stuff. So I understand that. But I think in general, Edu will re-sign players and get them on new contracts to protect their value. And Arteta doesn't really, it's not like that means that Arteta wants that player forever, because he'll not play that player anymore. We re-signed Tierney, and Arteta sat up there and said how important he was to the team, and then phased him out like a year later. So I don't think, I get that Edu is responsible for doing the negotiating and all that kind of stuff, Tim Lewis, but it is on Mikel Arteta to, and Edu, I think, to work together to create a squad that Arteta wants to use, because re-signing players and then not using them and devaluing them and then going out to the market not being able to sell them is a consistent theme. And so maybe Edu needs to, I don't know, they need to figure out something, because the players that we're bringing in for the squad aren't getting playing time. The academy players that have been there for a while don't get playing time, and the academy players that are in the academy now aren't getting playing time. You know, so I get what you're saying, but they need to work together a little bit better, I think, to make a squad that Arteta can get the most out of. And if this is the squad that Edu wants to build, and this is the plan of the club, is to have this type of a team, and bring in these types of players, then they need a manager that's going to be able to work with those resources, because Arteta's not getting anywhere near enough out of it. I get what you're saying, though. It's just strange, you know. Samuel, thank you so much for your super chat. Says it most for Mikel to a major trophy this season. It most for Mikel to a major trophy this weekend, this season. I feel like I'm trying to. It mostly for Mikel to win a major trophy this season. It's like, are you saying it's mostly for Mikel to win a major trophy this season? A lot of people expect Mikel Arteta to win a major trophy this season. I don't expect it. That's why I was like, I expect us to win something. You have 4 shots to win something. And, because it's hard to win the Premier League. That's also why I feel like some people are being a little bit disingenuous with this idea of like, the FA Cup is not important because we're focused on the Premier League. Statistically, we have a very low chance of winning the Premier League. I think when we started off the season, it was like 50% it was going to be Man City, and it was like 9 to 12% Arsenal. Like, you have a very small chance of winning the Premier League statistically. And the way that the season is going now, it doesn't look like we're going to win it. That doesn't mean we can't, but it doesn't look like we're going to win it. We don't have a gap at the top. We're kind of in and amongst the group. But if we're near Man City and Liverpool now in the second half of the season, who would you bet on to drop more points? I would bet on Arsenal, despite me loving my team, on dropping more points than Liverpool and Man City. Because that's just how it's been. Until I see Arsenal go through a 14-game win streak, then it's hard for me to envisage them dropping less points than teams that I've seen do that in the past, right? And have better managers and maybe better squads and more world-class players. I'm just calling a spade a spade. So without like that gap, up front, it doesn't look likely that we're going to win the Premier League. It doesn't, doesn't mean we can't. It just doesn't look like it. So the idea that we should just focus on a competition that we have a very little chance of winning anyway, and that should be our only focus in the Champions League as well, which we have a small chance of winning too, by the way. It just feels like we're cutting off our nose to spite our face. Like, sometimes you have to focus on smaller things and put a little bit more effort there. Because if Arteta were to win an FA Cup and to get to the semifinal of the Champions League and go out to Real freaking Madrid and barely miss out on the Premier League, I don't think I would be that upset. But what I will be upset with is if we go out on Sunday in the FA Cup, we go out early in the Champions League to Porto or whoever the fuck in the quarterfinal, and we're well off the pace in the Premier League. That's all I'm saying. You can buy yourself more time and favor with the fan base by winning small trophies. You can, because that's what fans will remember, is that this guy won us something. Right now, he's winning us second place and fifth place, and that's not anything. That's nothing, Samuel, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, I was saying it is a most for him to win a cup. Gotcha. Makes sense. Thank you so much. I get it now. I get what you're saying. Your boy says, Jess, your thoughts on the pessimistic and optimistic fans. Are fans on board? Wait, are the fans or the board the reason why Arsenal haven't won the Premier League in 20 years? I guess it's like a combination. I think a lot of people were in like a sleepy state under Arsene Wenger. And because as a fan base, we're very attached and emotional, nostalgic, all those types of things. Like, we're probably one of the most like emotional fan bases and attached to things that maybe we don't need to be. But I do think that we were in, like, the fans actively had a part to play in Arsene staying maybe longer than he should have, but it's also up to the club. If they were more ruthless, the fans would become more ruthless, because that would be their normality. Chelsea, their fans are ruthless and don't care about managers and want to fire and sack because that's how their ownership has been. So it goes hand in hand, but it's mostly the owners. Like, let's be real. The owners are not they don't want it enough. So yeah, but I want to know how you guys feel about the FA Cup. Really, how do you guys feel? There's 200 of you guys in here, so get in the chat and let me know what you guys are thinking. Because I read this tweet out, or I read this tweet and then I retweeted it because there's two different things. There's the Arsenal side of things where I feel like some fans are already setting up a cushion for when we go out event, like if we go out to Liverpool, there's a reason why it's okay for us not to win the FA Cup, or why it's okay for us to bomb out early in every single round no matter who we play, because it doesn't matter if we play Liverpool and we go out, or we play Nottingham Forest and go out. It's all the same. When we get, like, we go out early almost every single year, no matter who the competition is, no matter how the squad looks. It is right now, under 4 years, if we go out to Liverpool, it's just who we are. We go out early, right? And so this is from Adam Crafton. Adam Crafton says the annual campaign to instruct people to respect the FA Cup is becoming weaker. Do people aged 30 or below have nostalgic memories attachment to the FA Cup? There's some decent ties this year, but I'm about as excited by it overall as I would be an international break. And I don't know who Adam supports. He may support Arsenal. I don't know who he supports. I s- I don't know who he supports, but it's I do feel that. I feel that people don't care about the FA Cup as much as they did back in. They don't care about domestic cups at all. In fact, like, certain managers have kind of made a point to kind of speak about the domestic cups more as, like, just distractions from the majors, right? And as much as I understand, for big clubs, it doesn't matter, because they're fighting on bigger fronts and all this kind of stuff. But I do think, like, I believe in the magic of the FA Cup. Sorry, I have to put this heater on. I'm too cold. I believe in the magic of the FA Cup, and I do feel like we're losing recipes. We're losing recipes. Football is becoming so devoid of any sort of, like, emotional attachment to anything. It's so based on the now and the money and the big, and that's why the Super League will eventually come about, because people don't care about these competitions anymore, and they just want to see this hyper realistic version of football that's not really the thing. And so I feel that people just don't care about the FA Cup as much as, in general, they don't care about it. It saddens me because I love the FA Cup. Obviously, when you've won it more than anybody else, it is important to you. But it does feel like we're trying to pull teeth to make teams take it serious. Like, the big teams, like Liverpool, have thrown these competitions for years. It's only recent that Klopp has even attempted to put, decent squads out. And I think that's also a reason why Arsenal fans don't take it serious, is because they take this, the way that Liverpool built things is the way that we need to build things. So they want, like, a carbon copy blueprint of the way that Liverpool have done it. It is true that early doors, before Liverpool won any of the major trophies in the Premier League or the Champions League, they actively threw the domestic cups. They would play kids. Remember, we played against them and it ended like 5-5 or something, and we went to penalties, some nonsense like that. I don't know if you guys remember that or not. I think, yeah, we did. You guys, I know you guys remember it. It was interesting. It was fun because both of us had academy kids out there. But Klopp has always done that. He's always thrown the domestic cups. But the difference between Klopp and Arteta now is that we don't have any guarantee that that's going to give us a Premier League or a Champions League. And they didn't have that guarantee either, but they know now that they did the right thing. We still don't know that if we throw these domestic cup competitions, that inevitably means that we'll win the Champions League or the Premier League under Mikel Arteta. We don't know that, because Klopp and Arteta are two completely different people. And so I don't think we need to always look at what Liverpool have done and say, you know what, because they did it, that's the way to go. I don't think we have to do everything carbon copy, especially when one of these domestic competitions is one that's near and dear to Arsenal fans' hearts, right? And so I understand that as a footballing community, we don't care about the domestic cups anymore because the big teams don't care about it, because they're fighting on all fronts and they need to protect their players and things like that. But from an Arsenal perspective, the FA Cup is a really good opportunity to get that cup thing off of our shoulders. Right now, the FA Cup that Arteta won in 2019 doesn't even feel like something that we've won under Mikel Arteta anymore. And he deserves all the credit, but we weren't playing this style. None of these players were involved. It was 4 years ago. We're very beyond that. We're so separate from that. The team was completely different. So I would love to see Arsenal. And when I say take it serious, I don't mean that you have to risk players that are injured or anything like that. But what I don't want to see is what we did against West Ham. That was so ridiculous. Like when I saw the lineup, I was like, we're going out. You just knew we were going out because this team that they've constructed, Edu and Arteta have constructed together, when you rotate 7-8 players out, you lose. We know this. We struggled so much in the Europa League last season because we made wholesale changes. And that to me doesn't make any sense. It still doesn't make any sense to me why rotating means we can't kick a ball to each other, but that's a separate conversation. But what we did against West Ham was throwing the competition, in my opinion. Arteta could not have thought that that group of players was going to do anything away from home against West Ham because none of them have confidence. None of those players have played together before. And I don't know what to tell you. Like, that front six was never going to do the business. They weren't. I think it was like wasn't it Jorginho, Vieira, Havertz, Emile Smith-Rowe, maybe? No, it wasn't Emile Smith-Rowe. I know Nketiah was out there. It was bad. It was bad. Like, I know Reece Nelson was out there too. It was bad. Trossard might have been out there as well. It was bad. And so that's what I don't want to see. A strong lineup has got to go out there. And if we go out, we go out. We can talk about that after. But I just don't want to see any nonsense of like not our best front three, not our best midfield, some weird defense. Like, I don't want to see that because there's no reason to do it. There's no reason to do it. We haven't won anything. We have not won enough to be arrogant about what we should be prioritizing or, what is important. Like, oh, well, the FA Cup is just a small cup. Like, who are we to say that? We haven't won enough to be that way. You know what I mean? And so I do think that, like, I want to see Arsenal really try and put their heart into it and not go into it with this, like, robotic way of doing things. Like, I feel like sometimes we're just too okay with fucking losing. And that annoys me so much. You got to get into the heart of these players sometimes and be like, we're going to win this shit and like get them up for it. And, but we seem very okay with going out of certain cups. Like the way that we went out of Europa League last season, we actually did not start caring about the competition until it looked like we were going out. And that pissed me off because it's just like, how arrogant can you be? Tashima says Klopp has won the league and the Champions League. He can afford to chuck a cup, but he was chucking it before. That's what I'm saying. Like, and that's why, like, Arsenal fans, like, and Liverpool fans probably, like, I don't think Klopp didn't win anything for like his first 3 or 4 seasons at Liverpool. But he was chucking the cup before he even won the Premier League or the Champions League. He was, so he can't afford to do it now. He doesn't do it as much now because, I mean, I guess he feels like he has the squad to do it. But yeah, he was like, before he even won anything with Liverpool, he never took those cups seriously. Maybe because he had like a small squad and he knew that they couldn't go the distance and all this kind of stuff. But, listen, he's actually won things, So yeah, the McChronicle says Liverpool won a domestic cup double 2 years ago, but that was after they won. You guys, I'm talking about before. Listen to what I'm saying. Before they won the Premier League and the Champions League, he actively chucked the cups. He did. He actively chucked them all the time. And then after they won things, after they won, the big trophies, they won a domestic double. And then they also had the season where they didn't win anything, but they got to all the finals. So I remember I watched, it was before they even won anything. Remember, Klopp has been there for 8-9 years. So there was a time before they actually won things where he was chucking the cups, but they weren't winning the big trophies. They were really close in the title race though, So, but the thing is like, they know now that that was the right path for them to go on because it maybe they don't like, I feel like I feel like maybe Liverpool fans, maybe they would feel like, I wish we had gone a little bit harder so we would have more domestic cups. Do you know what I mean? We had, because the thing is like last season when we looked like we were going to win the league, I made the point that, like, as good as Klopp has been, if Arteta were to win the Premier League, he would have one less domestic cup than Klopp because he did win the domestic double. You know what I mean? And so maybe they would think that they could have went harder in those domestic cups early on, but they'll take what they've gotten. I just don't know if Arsenal need to like follow that plan to the T, that blueprint to the T, because we don't know it. Like Arteta is not Klopp, so and he even in like he doesn't really like. When's the last time he got to a final? Liverpool are actively in finals and like at the very like last minute losing the Premier League. Arteta doesn't even really do that. I think the furthest that we've gotten in a domestic cup since the FA Cup that we won was in the Carabao Cup, and then we lost to Liverpool like in the semifinal or something like that. Boy says Klopp basically did the Girona run at Dortmund. He had priors to justify throwing the cups, and he did have that extra like experience too, which made it like, okay, he knows what he's doing. Netweed says winning the FA Cup is the worst thing that can happen to us. Our insufferable fake fans will go wild and bust out the red open top bus parade like we did when Arteta won our second Champions League. I don't think winning a cup is ever a bad thing. So I don't agree. I don't really agree with, well, I don't want us to win a cup because that'll mean that our fans will be happy about winning it. Like, I don't really agree with that. So yeah. The formidable Centurion says the bigger fish to fry changing its tune. Personally, I never said bigger fish to fry, so that doesn't really account for me. I was actively slandered last season for suggesting that we were not good in the Europa League in the group stages and that when we got out of it, we would suffer. I never said bigger fish to fry, and I always thought it was a stupid thing to say because these things to me are like success breeds success. Like you can't like the more you go out of competitions early, I think you're losing. It's not prioritizing, it's losing. So I personally would like to see our team win more games than drop out early of things. You know what I mean? But I never bought into the bigger fish to fry. And when people were yelling at me about the Europa League, but then came on streams after we went out of the Europa League, embarrassingly so, and acted like they cared about it, I was like, yeah, but you guys acted like it was important when I was telling you that we were terrible, like against Bodo Glimt and Zurich. Like it was strange how bad we were against those teams. They acted like it was normal. It's not normal to be that bad. It's not normal to be that bad. Like, be serious. You're the top of the Premier League, but you can barely beat Bodo Glimt. Like, that's not normal to me. Kenda says, why are the replays in the FA Cup? Why are there replays in the FA Cup? Teams need a rest. They should go. Depends after 90. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I mean, I'm not looking forward to another trip to Anfield. I know that for sure. So, how do you guys feel about replays? Tashima says, who cares? Winning is winning. Boy says, Arteta does not blood the youngsters. Blooding youngsters in football is the act of preparing for the future. Arteta fails to prepare, so I'm preparing for him to fail. Also, the trick that he always misses is that you go further in the cups, the more academy kids you use. That has always been a very fruitful thing for us in the past, is if you use some academy kids in the cups, they have more energy and excitement for the cups than your squad players do. Because what I think ends up happening is psychologically, as a squad player, especially when you're playing like if you're playing behind Eddie Nketiah every week, you're demoralized and you lack confidence. And so it almost feels like you're being thrown a competition that Arteta doesn't care about. If I'm a good player, say I'm Trossard, right? I'm Trossard. I'm a good player. I'm experienced. And every time I get a chance to start a game, I look around and I see Eddie, I see Reece Nelson, I see Fabio Vieira, I see Kivior, I see Jorginho, I see a team full of guys that don't play very often. I'm thinking I'm getting booty minutes. I'm getting minutes in a cup that Arteta doesn't care about because none of the starters are around me. It's actively this is not an important game. So I think it's hard to get up for games like that because the manager is already telling you he doesn't give a shit about it. If you go, and even if you do play well, you're not going to start in the Premier League. being good in the cups does not equal getting a chance in the Premier League. So you put out a bunch of players out there that know whether they win or lose, it doesn't matter, because you go out, that's what the manager probably it sets you up to do anyway. But if you play well, you're not going to play anyway. But players that don't give a shit about that, academy kids. They're like, finally get a chance to play for my team. I've never gotten a chance to play before. They'll show out. Our academy kids have always done well in early rounds of cups. Always. I remember when we played against like Bournemouth, Eddie Howe's Bournemouth, I think. And our academy players, it was like Eddie, Willick, Martinelli was there too, but he's not an academy kid. But you get what I'm saying. Like, they balled out. We won that game easy, 3-0. This team now, if you rotate, could not beat Nottingham Forest. Like, do you see what I'm saying? So use the kids. Use the kids. Use them, because they're always excited to play. They're always excited to be a part of the team. Always. Like, they're always excited, But that's just, I feel like you're missing a trick. You're missing a trick. Put a couple of them out there, They would love to play in those games, whether they play the next game or not. The Arsenal Perspective says, guys, seriously, I'm disappointed we haven't won the EFL Cup but twice. I am annoyed we haven't won a cup in 4 years and depressed by the 20-year title drought, European pedigree. Nah, come on. That's why I just don't think we should be that arrogant about which ones we should, take serious or not. Like, yeah, we have to prioritize, and you don't want to really risk, like, if you get down to like the final weeks, you do have to prioritize certain things. But I think this early on in the season to be like, we're prioritizing for the Premier League when, it just doesn't make any sense to me when we have a warm weather break after this. Like, I would love to see them go as hard as they possibly can, beat Liverpool, and change the trajectory of our season, because this is not losing to Liverpool. You start to look at what we've done over the last couple of weeks and start talking about a crisis. And I know it's Liverpool, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You need to start winning games. You didn't turn it around against Fulham, so now you have to turn it around against one of the best teams in the league. Tough shit. You should have played better against Fulham. You should have played better. What are you doing? As God, voice of one, says, Arteta sucks at man management. We actually, me and Diluted disagreed on this in the pod that we did on Patreon. I actually said that it is up to the manager to breathe confidence into players, and he said the opposite, that the players need to come with their own confidence. I think it's a relationship. I think the players need to bring some confidence, but when they are confident and then the manager does everything in his power to demoralize that confidence, then you have to look at the manager. And when there's big groups of players that don't have confidence, like your entire attack doesn't have confidence and nobody on your bench has confidence and they all are playing badly, then you have to look at the manager, right? And so it's a pattern. It's not just one player. It's not just Kivior. It's everybody on the bench comes off the bench and looks like shit. And all of our attack looks bad right now. That's on the manager to me. So it is on the manager to get the players mentally, like, in an environment mentally, like, to play as good as they can. And I think something that Arteta doesn't do is he doesn't take the pressure off of the players. The pressure looks like it's weighing them down so badly. They don't play with freedom. They don't play with excitement or fun or joy. And so when you have so much like pressure on you, the only players that look like they're playing without any sort of stress are the defenders. Saliba, Gabriel, Rice, they look like they play with freedom every game. But everybody further forward looks like they're like running in mud, and it's like you need to see those players they need to feel like they can make mistakes and it's not going to be the end of the world. They don't have goldfish brains. They don't. And it's up to the manager to relieve that pressure off of them, and give them the confidence to do well. Kenneth says it's a good thing that we are out of form now. So that then how we lost towards the end of, it's good that we're out of form now than how we lost towards the end of last season. I have hope things will improve starting Sunday. They have to. Netweed says, congratulations on a totally irrelevant comment. You guys are talking to each other, I think. Nuances of Faith says, truth is we need a better manager. There I said it. I don't see anything changing until this changes. Natalie says, bench players have lost confidence? Trossard, Smith Rowe, Nelson. I mean, do they look like they have confidence? when you watch when I watch other teams play and I watch their bench players come off the bench and make changes. And like, yeah, we've had some of our bench players come off and score goals or um score goals, right? Like Trossard has done earlier on in the season, or Nketiah came off the bench halfway through the Fulham game and scored goals, and Fabio Vieira played well in that game as well. But I actually think those moments are more few and far between than they should be. I think most of the time when you bring players off of our bench, they make no difference whatsoever. They don't look, you know, they don't look like making a change. So yeah, you have the odd moment where mostly the main player that comes off of the bench and scores goals is Trossard, main one. Anybody else that's doing it, like you can say, okay, like Martinelli scored the goal against Man City. He came off the bench. He's a starter. I'm talking about true squad players. I'm talking about ESR, um, Nelson, ESR, Trossard. Those are the ones I'm talking about. And maybe Nketiah, but he at the beginning of the season he was damn near a starter. Those are the players that I'm talking about. Fabio Vieira, players that we know are not starters. How many times have they scored goals and changed the game when they come on? Not players that normally start that weren't starting that game. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm just trying to understand, like, why is it that our players come off of the bench and do nothing? Let's see. Foxy says Willock has been a great signing for us, really missing him at the moment with his injury. Arsenal should have kept him. A lot of pace in that midfield. I actually wish we'd sell more players. Actually, I would love for us to sell Emil Smith Rowe to you guys. I don't think we've missed Willock at all, to be honest with you. I think, especially like last season, we had one of the best midfields in the league. This season, our midfield, maybe not as functional as last season, but there's not a single moment where I sit there and I think, oh, we could really just use Willock. Willock was a good player from our academy that we got 25 million for. And I wish we do much more of those deals. I wish, if you guys offered 35 million for Smith Rowe, I would take it. I think, it worked out for both parties. I don't think we miss Willock, but I'm glad you guys are enjoying him. And yeah, maybe you guys aren't missing him a little bit. Ali A says the FA Cup and League Cup are side dishes to the main course, and Premier League champs simple as. Even if they're side dishes, that doesn't mean that it's not important to nick a couple of those. It's very difficult to win the Premier League and the Champions League. Very difficult. So the idea that like they just shouldn't matter to us at all and we should just throw them every year makes no sense to me as a team that doesn't win enough. Blaze says, I remember ESR came off of the bench against Bournemouth away. He missed a chance to score goals and he was upset. Zinchenko and Albert consoled him at the end of the game. I remember that as well. But why is he crying? Like, I was like, is he okay? Maybe the pressure is just too much, or maybe he feels his Arsenal career slipping away. I don't know, I love Emil, but he needs more playing time to be more effective, but he's not going to get that. Boy says Willock, when he runs with the ball in the midfield, it scares defenses. He's really good at Newcastle. He suits their style really well. Netweed says, we don't capitalize. We don't take advantage of dips. Arteta's tired, but trying. It's not enough for Arsenal after 20 years. Mate, we've been patient enough. AirPod Albert, that's all I know him as. I'm not this, whatever his last name is, Stivenberg, whatever. He's not that. He's AirPod Albert, and he will always be that. Tashima says Trossard is probably the best finisher, totally wasted. Trossard is a player that people are actively convincing themselves is not a good player. The work that we'll do to not place any sort of responsibility on the manager is really good. Like, honestly, if I was in a bind and I did a crime, or I needed to go to court, I would hire Arsenal fans to defend me, because nobody can defend somebody that's indefensible more than an Arsenal fan. I'm sorry, but you are not going to gaslight me into thinking Trossard is not a good player. You also won't gaslight me into thinking that all the players on the bench are just all shit and Arteta is getting the most out of them. You will not gaslight me into that. No one will gaslight me into that. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you won't. Like, there's just no way. I cannot watch a player play well, and then a couple of months later they're not playing well, and then people be like, well, Trossard was just shit. Nah, bruh. Nah, like no, sorry. But I will hire you guys if I need defense because nobody defends better than Arsenal fans. No one. Um, the McChronicle says Trossard can really only play false nine at Arsenal, but when he plays there, our attack looks functional. It does. I mean, it's simple to me. People pretend like he didn't play false nine against Sevilla for us because I think at home he played against Sevilla when we won 2-0. He played false nine and he did a good job and he scored a goal. But people are telling me this player is not any good. They're lying. Like they're actively lying on a player that they've watched play well because they want to defend something that's indefensible. Trossard needs to be more central. He needs to be near players so that he can create. And he also needs to be near the goal because his main superpower is something that we do not have, which is goal scoring. So, it's indefensible for me. It's just nonsense. Nuances of Fate says Arsenal fans are trying to gaslight me into believing he's an incredible CM. Um, who are you talking about? Lucas says what Arteta did to preseason Trossard. Preseason Trossard needed to start the season. He should have started against Nottingham Forest, and he didn't. He was dropped, and Martinelli started. And I love Martinelli, I do, but he has not been good at all this season. I was like, when we played against Fulham, I was like, he was awful. Actually, when we played against, I said he was awful against Fulham, and everybody came for me, and I was like, but he wasn't good. Like he fundamentally was not good. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but he wasn't good. And then he had the when we played against Monaco in the Emirates Cup, he was awful then. And I was like, damn, Trossard really needs to start the season because I don't know what's going on with Martinelli. He just never has gotten going. And ever since then, like now people are coming to the realization that Martinelli is like, we're in a really bad place with Martinelli because he hasn't been good all season. There has not been a stretch of games where he has played anywhere near the level that we know him to play. And I'll keep the same energy with him that I am with Trossard. We know this player is not a bad player because we've seen him play well. So it's either him, which I think some of it is him, and some of it is the tactics from the manager, right? But he didn't play well in preseason. He didn't. So I don't know why Trossard didn't start the season. He should have. He should have started the season. He was playing well in preseason. He played in that MLS fucking game. He played all that time when Martinelli wasn't there. The Martinelli comes straight in and starts and has not been good at all this season. But whenever Trossard is in a good run of form, boom, out. I'm just like, that's just not how you manage players. It's just not. When somebody's in a good run of form, you keep them in there. You keep them in there. You keep, just like he was doing with Tommy. It's amazing to me that he can do it with Tommy, but he can't do it with anybody else. Tommy was playing well, so no matter who it was, he was willing to yank out Zinchenko or White to make sure that Tomiyasu was playing, which is the right thing to do because Tommy was in form. See what I'm saying? But Trossard, if he's in form, it's like, nah, can't play you. It's like, bruh. Dodge says, Arteta showed at the start of his reign how wasteful he was with resources, but not using Ozil and Abba when he could. I think that's an interesting point. I think, I can understand why people feel that way as well, because like at that point, Arteta basically was like he had washed his hands of those players. Everybody from that team, basically, in particular, Ozil and Aubameyang was like, I need them out. And I understood like the idea of like having bad apples and all this kind of stuff, because quite frankly, we had seen what they had done with Emery. And so it was not that hard to see how they would have been with Arteta. They didn't respect Emery, so they definitely weren't going to respect Arteta. And so when you come into a dressing room like that, you have to put your foot down. And sometimes that does mean you have to make hard decisions. But, I think another manager comes in and uses those players. Like I had this conversation with a friend the other day that if Ancelotti had come in instead of Arteta, like they swapped, Arteta went to Everton and Ancelotti went to Arsenal, he would have gotten the instant respect from Aubameyang and Ozil, and we would have used them. I don't think that they were unusable. I think for Mikel Arteta, they were unusable because of the fact that they didn't respect him. And as a manager, you can't have people in your dressing room that do not respect you. And so they ended up being useless for us, So I can understand why some people are still upset by that. I still see people talking about Aubameyang and Ozil. I've made peace with it. I thought they were bad apples. I did not love their attitude at all. Period. You guys know I didn't. I thought that they were bigger than the club, and they're not. But Arteta does tend to just cast people aside without getting anything out of them. And while I could give him a grace for players that are not his, I give him way less grace for players that are. You bought these players, so you need to use them. Aubameyang and Ozil were not his players. So I could see that a little bit more when you start seeing that he doesn't really like some of the players that have come in under his own thing. I'm like, what the fuck? I know you didn't really want Trossard. You wanted Mudryk, but don't disrespect Trossard. He's not a bad player, So yeah. Netweed says the shocking thing we have to accept is as long as Arteta stick to this style and as good as Declan can be, we have not replaced 2022, 2023 Xhaka. My issue with this is, yeah, like I agree with you. I think if you were going to move away from Xhaka, and bring in somebody that's completely different in Havertz, then you needed to modify your style to suit the players that you got. And he hasn't done that. We still try to play the exact same way that we did last season, albeit even less adventurous with players that don't really have the same technical quality, And so, yeah, Arteta it feels like a lot of his plans have fallen flat just because, like, the players that he has brought in don't necessarily do the same things as the players that they've replaced. And, we're still heavily relying on Zinchenko, but Zinchenko's worse than he was last season, but he's still really, really important. And there's just a lot of different things that, there's just a lot of different things. But, what can you do? Arteta needs to figure out a way to make this group of players work. And before we played against West Ham and before we played against Fulham, against Brighton, it was working. We did look good. We were still not finishing off our chances, but our problems had moved away from, midfield and the balance and all this kind of stuff. It was more about putting the ball in the back of the net. And so I still feel like that's our major issue. It's not so much about the buildup. Against Fulham, the buildup became a problem because we did not have Zinchenko. But based on the reports that are coming out, Zinchenko may be fit, so that's a good thing for us. Despite people not liking him, at least that means that you can use Havertz. You cannot use Havertz without him, And so, yeah, that's kind of where, I think the problem is more that we don't put the ball in the back of the net right now than anything. And there's a heavy emphasis on Odegaard to do a lot of the creating. And I feel like that's also the payoff of having one player in your team that their job is so niche that they don't help with any of the other things. You don't get any of the Xhaka things from Havertz. You don't get any creation things from him either that Xhaka was doing. So there's a lot of more emphasis and more heavy lifting that everybody else has to do. And so, I don't know what Arteta was thinking with it. If Timber would have made that big of a difference, but and maybe Thomas Partey not being there also is an issue. So yeah, because I don't know what Arteta was thinking. I would love to be a fly on the wall to what they were saying in the summer because it's still it's very unclear what we were actually trying to accomplish. Nuances of Fate says we aren't just missing Xhaka. We don't have a CM. Havertz's strengths aren't in central mid. Netweed says his style now needed a top striker. Havertz was late, and Arteta is not the caliber of coach to guide him. Tuchel was a proper defensive coach and told Havertz to run forwards only. And I wonder, yeah, I mean, if Arteta's whole plan or one of his plans was to play Havertz up front as a stopgap striker because we couldn't get who we really wanted or something like that. Maybe that does make sense. And then it would have been Declan Rice and Thomas Partey. But if your plans revolved around Thomas Partey being fit, I also question you very much so, So I don't know what his plans were. I really don't. Neville says it's a shame that most of our fans are put the blame where it truly belongs. Arteta has failed at man management since he came to the football club. 70% of the blame is on Arteta. I don't know. I do think a lot of it is on him. The players have to hold their own responsibility too to a lot of this stuff, but A lot of it is on Mikel Arteta. I just feel like it's okay to have conversations about Arteta that are not always about how great he's been, because as good as he's been, he's made mistakes and he's actively making mistakes. And I feel like that's what I constantly combat every single day, is being able to have honest conversations without it being about Arteta out, Arteta's the best, like I do think a lot of this is on him, but the players have to take some responsibility as well, for sure. Boy says Thomas Partey started right back when everyone was fit at the start of the season with Havertz and CM and Jesus at center forward. He wants to play Havertz and CM ahead of some of the party combination. Yeah, like I've said that from the beginning, that it never really made sense to me that, like, as much as people are trying to convince me that Havertz was always meant to play up front and it was always going to be Rice and Partey, I just don't understand why you wouldn't have started with that from the very beginning, because you didn't actually have to play Thomas Partey at right back. As much as people are trying to convince me that you had to, you didn't have to. And yeah, like maybe you wanted to invert from the other side, but you didn't have Zinchenko. So you put Timber over there and then tried to do it with Thomas Partey. But any manager would prioritize their main midfield combination as the most important thing to get right than some faux inverting thing that we don't even have the players to complete right now, if that makes sense. So if Arteta prioritized playing with the invert without having Zinchenko because Zinchenko wasn't there, versus the midfield pairing that would inevitably be the reason why we win or lose, right? Because you need to get your midfield right. If Partey and Rice are your midfield combination, then they need to start playing together and play together every week. So that's why I don't believe that Havertz was always brought in to play center mid, and maybe he would have been an option up front, but for the most part, Arteta had decided that he was going to go with Rice and Havertz with some sort of inversion, maybe on both sides or one. And because Timber is not there, everything fell apart, and that's why our season is a little bit flat. It's just a little bit flat. The Arsenal perspective says Havertz is a in CM doing Partey impersonation is not the one. um, Again, it all goes back to the player, like having so many players that their main thing that they do is outside of the position that they play. You can't have Havertz and Zinchenko and Jesus. None of them are doing the job. So we don't have a striker, we don't have another midfielder, and we don't have a left back. Okay. You know, um, I don't know. It feels a little bit convoluted. I mean, it doesn't have to be. Nico says, question, Jess, why is the manager so protected by the fan base? I genuinely don't get it. Because the fan base does not want to go back to, they are so traumatized by what happened with Arsene and Emery, with Emery out and Arsene out and all that kind of stuff, that they don't want to go back through it again, because it's not fun. It's not fun going into a negative era in your club. And Arsenal fans are more like, we're just not used to the hiring, firing, and how it feels, So I think the Arsene thing and how toxic that got, because Arsene out, Wenger out, was horrendous. It was so bad, And so I think there's this like active, like desperation almost to be positive, even when things aren't, because also what happens when the fan base is not like always positive, rivals pick up on it, they start bantering us. We're really weak when it comes to like rival banter as well. Like when rivals start bantering us, we tend to really like get really rattled by it. And so I just think it's like, I'd rather pretend like this is working than open up the conversation around maybe it's not working and then have to go through, the out, because it's not fun. It's not, you know, it's not fun. Um, that's what I think it is. I don't think it's because they love Arteta. I think it's they don't want to go through it again. Because that was really damaging, I think, for a lot of people. To be honest, it's a big reason why people hated freaking AFTV. They blamed AFTV for the demise of the club. I'm like, well, if we were good, AFTV wouldn't exist. You know what I mean? They wouldn't have the narrative, So there's just a lot of toxicity around Wenger out, how it started, how it ended. And I just think there's like a general like, no, we are good and it's fine and this is the way to go, and ignore any sort of red flags because like I don't want to go through it again. That's it. It's not about Arteta, because we have a very intelligent fan base. Anybody that's watching Arteta right now would have questions. Like, I know they have questions. They just don't want to put it out there because it's negative. You know, Mikey says, let's not be so loud all the time for fuck's sake. We do like to talk, that's for sure. Rick said, fearful managers rarely win league titles. Ferguson, Klopp, Pep, even Wenger always overloaded a yard in front of opposition D to create and smother chances. This season, Arteta doesn't allow that. We do need to be more open attacking. We need to take more risk. And, you know, Arteta said we needed to take more risk against Brentford, and we still haven't really done that as much as I would like. I think we've kind of done it, you know, against Lons and against Wolves and stuff like that. But there's still like an era of almost like, but we have to make sure we don't give up the ball. And I do think it's going to be hard to find that perfect balance. If Arteta's trying to find that perfect balance between attack and control, and being really dangerous in control, I don't think he's going to find it, because in order to be really dangerous going forward, you do have to give away some of your control. And I feel like he's unwilling to give that away. I think it's really difficult to do. And I think that's why most teams don't have it. Manchester City have they have a world-class manager that's been there and done it before. He's figured out a way to have a really potent attack that also controls the game. But he has a different level of technician in his team that we just don't have. Arteta wants control, but I'm like, how are we getting that control? If we want to have control by winning duels, then we need more duel monsters in our team. That's a way to control the game too, is by winning the ball off of players all the time. Being brutes. You can do that. That's fine. But we've neither committed toward the duel monster or the technical control. You can either control by controlling territory, or you can control the ball, you know? And we're kind of halfway between, you know, because we can only control games with Zinchenko, who's primarily a technical player, but everybody else in our midfield, like Declan and Havertz, are more off the ball players. So I don't really know how Arteta wants to control the game, but I don't think he's really nailed it down as such. Last season, we controlled the game by passing the ball around teams. And, you know, but we also gave up some of that control by being really open. So I don't know if we'll ever get that Pep level of balance, but there's probably only one team that will ever have that level of balance, and that probably is Manchester City's Pep, because he'll have the resources, he has the brain, he has the technical players in his team. We don't have the same players, so I think it's hard. I think it's hard to get that balance. I don't think we'll ever get it. You know, I don't think we'll ever get it. I'd rather see our team take a little bit more risks and take a bet on the £100 million insurance policy that we bought in the summer. That's what I want to see, just a little bit more. Mikey says he doesn't have sufficient quality money as an issue. RD2 Senna says, as much as there are a lot of Arteta outers, I can't imagine Arsenal paying Conte or Simeone style playing Conte or Simeone style. Even they were managers that won trophies, and I don't think Arsenal will ever hire a manager that doesn't play quote unquote good football. I don't think we'll ever do that. I think they will stay true to the idea that Arsenal play the right way. But even Arteta doesn't really play that great of football all the time either. Like this season, he's really far gone the fluid style he's damn near, he's veering into Simeone territory. So if you're going to do it, do it. If we're going to be the dual monster, the dark arts, the set piece, the big, strong, brute players, if that's what we're going to be, and defensively sound and nick a goal, then do it. Just do it. You know, do it. Like, I don't care. Just do it. You know, but if you're going to be tiki-taka, juga disposition, you know, 100 passes, then make sure you have the technical players to do it. I just want to see him commit to something, you know? Rick says, just the truth is we don't have a single midfielder who can put a magical short pass or chip from center through a low block. To me, that I don't think that's our biggest problem. I'll be honest with you. I think a lot of people are going back to the problems that we had, like the problems that we had pre the breakthrough, because I feel like we're having the same conversations that we had in the first 5-6 games of the season, but now we're 20 games in and we have different problems now. And yeah, we may not have Thomas Partey in our midfield, because that's what basically people are saying. We don't have Thomas Partey in our midfield, so we're not getting those through balls. But they're getting loads of chances, you guys. They are. Beyond, if you take Fulham out, we're creating a lot of chances despite not having a midfield maestro per se, without having Thomas Partey. I'm sorry, but like when they were missing those sitters, I was not thinking about what Thomas Partey would have done for us or what Xhaka would have done for us. So yeah, I would love to see another midfielder come in that has that passing ability, the ability to pass those through balls in. But I cannot get over the idea, like the fact that despite not having probably our most balanced midfield, these attackers have 12 goals amongst each other and they've had chances. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, we do need another midfielder. But right now, that attack needs to start attacking. They need to get real. They need to get really real and look at themselves in the mirror and say, why is it that when I get right in front of the goal, I can't kick it in the back of the net? People were saying that we had low quality chances against West Ham. And I feel like they didn't watch the game, because just because what's his name didn't have to make a save doesn't mean we had low quality chances. We didn't lock our fucking ankle when we were taking shots. Odegaard had made, in the first 10 minutes when we were actually playing well against West Ham, he did one of those like flicks behind the leg into Saka. And Saka has scored that same goal 5, 6, 7 times in the last 12 months. Roof it, top of the net, right there, or just pass it beyond the goalkeeper. What did he do? He passed it straight to Areola. That's a very high quality chance. When you have almost 3 XG, you had high quality chances in the game. And so, yeah, I get wanting to have the midfielder. I want the midfielder. You guys know who I want. I want Zubamendi. I would be open to the idea of Declan Rice playing left center mid if that meant that Zubamendi would do the dictating from deep. He would make sure that we didn't need Thomas Partey or Jorginho. And then Rice people wouldn't be, oh my God, but Declan Rice, he doesn't pass forward. He doesn't do the through balls. He doesn't dip the shoulder. Then I wouldn't have to hear that shit anymore. Declan Rice can just be the monster that he is and what he's been for 2023, winning the most possession of anybody in the Premier League in 2023. Then we can just do that, but we're not going to get that player now. We're not going to get that player now. And I think that's clear. So Arteta needs to modify his tactics a little bit to suit his star players and get them going in the final third, because despite Havertz being in the midfield, we still created enough chances to score loads of goals, and we haven't done it. Lucas says exactly. Saka scored way harder chances last year than this against West Ham. I think if the goalkeeper didn't have to make a good save, then those weren't good chances. What is that thought process? I don't really get it. Personally, I don't get that thought process. Saka also hit the post. He kicked it straight to Areola when Odegaard put him in on goal. Like, we had chances against West Ham. We only needed 2 or 3 to put the game away. It wasn't that deep. Ocampo says we aren't great, 13th from open play goals. That's not sustainable. But when you have 2 of the most creative players in the league in Odegaard and Saka, statistically, they are 2 of the most creative players in the league amongst James Maddison and Bruno Fernandes and players like that. We have 2 of the most creative players in the league, but we're in 13th for open play goals. The math ain't mathin', y'all. The math ain't mathin'. So coach said, did he ever play Rice and Partey in midfield together? Yeah, he did. He did in the Community Shield. We did it in preseason against Monaco. We did it in the Community Shield. And we also did it for like a couple of seconds against Manchester City when we beat them. But that's it. We haven't seen it. And Arteta had the opportunity to. He did. Because, again, Partey didn't get injured until about, 4 games in or something like that. So he had every game that Partey played at right back, he could have been playing in midfield next to Declan Rice. So it wasn't a priority for Arteta because, again, if I'm a manager and I'm like, I just have this new midfield combination, and midfield, the main thing that you need is a good midfield. If you don't have a good midfield, you won't do anything, right? So my priority, instead of fucking with the back line, I would have just started Timber and Ben White, because that was the option. You had that option. You could have started Timber and Ben White and Gabriel and Saliba. You could have. You had that option. Those players were available to you. And then my priority would have been making sure that Partey and Declan Rice worked on a strong partnership because that's the midfield that I wanted to play most games. But Arteta didn't do that. And so that's how I know it wasn't a priority. It just wasn't, you know? So yeah. Let's see. S Shot says Zubimendi won't work at Arsenal. Need a player who's good in the pockets like Pablo Torre or Pedri or FDJ. No, I mean, he's a number 6, so he wouldn't play in the pockets. He's a number 6. Belichick says Partey was inverting. Yeah, he was, but he wasn't good at it. Like he wasn't good at it. Like newsflash, like he was trying to invert. So one of the reasons why we conceded that goal against Fulham, that first goal that was in the first couple of seconds of the game, is because Partey was inverting, and when Saka turned around, he made a blind pass to who should have been Thomas Partey. He was inverting and he wasn't getting it right. I don't know why Arteta was thinking that Partey could invert. If you wanted a center midfielder that can invert from right back, you should have bought freaking Caicedo. Like, you know what I mean? Partey inverting was so strange. It never felt right. When he did it against Wolves, even in the final game of the season, when he did it against Nottingham Forest, it was odd. It was rough. Like it didn't work, you know? And yeah, I think that when he played there for Atletico, he was just a right back. But Arteta was making him invert. And it was odd fit. It was odd fit. So yeah, we have talked for an hour and 30 minutes about absolutely everything and nothing all at the same time. But you guys, it's Friday, so usually there's nothing going on. I will come on later at 9 p.m. if you guys are around. If you guys want to hang out a little bit longer, a little bit later we can. But make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. I also put a clip out from me and Deluded's conversation around like Kai Havertz in the midfield and stuff like that. It's on the channel in the clips section, and it's like the title is like It's Complicated. Was Havertz signing a mistake? You guys can watch that and show that some love if you guys want to. But I really enjoyed chit-chatting with you guys as usual. Early mornings on a Friday. People are asking me if I'm tired. Do I look tired? Yes, I am tired, but I do it for you guys. So, and I would do it every single day because I love you guys so much. So make sure you guys, and you guys like starting 11 and all that kind of stuff. We could talk about that at 9, but the strongest 11, I'm not gonna hold y'all. I don't want to rotate. I want our strongest 11, and you guys know what that is. So, we could talk about that later if you guys want to a little bit more at 9 p.m. But strongest 11, I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Okay, bye, y'all.